I'm sitting here looking at my address book, and there are so many names with lines drawn through them. Not because I don't want to call these people anymore, but because I can't. They're gone. And every time I have to draw another line through another name, I think about something that happened 3 years ago that changed how I see everything. I'm Harold, and I'm 80 years old. And when you reach my age, you start going to a lot more funerals than birthday parties. But it wasn't until I lost my friend George that I understood what that really means. George and I had been friends for 52 years. We met at work when we were both 28, fresh engineers at the same company. We started carpooling together, and that 20-minute drive each way turned into the foundation of a lifelong friendship. We did everything together. Golf every Saturday morning, poker nights with the guys, family barbecues in each other's backyards. When my wife died 8 years ago, George was the one who showed up at my house every morning for 2 weeks, making sure I was eating and had someone to talk to. When his son got into that car accident, I was the one who sat with him in the hospital waiting room for 12 hours straight. We had our routines. Coffee every Wednesday morning at 7:30, before most people were even awake. Same diner, same corner table, same waitress who knew we wanted black coffee and wheat toast. We'd talk about everything: our kids, our health, politics, sports, the state of the world. George was diagnosed with lung cancer on a Monday. By the following Monday, he was gone. 7 days. That's all the warning we got. I remember sitting in that hospital room on his last day and thinking about all the things we'd talked about doing someday. The fishing trip to Alaska we'd been planning for 10 years. The classic car show in Detroit we kept saying we'd drive to. The workshop he was going to help me build in my garage. All those some days that never came. But it wasn't just losing George that shook me. It was what happened afterward. The week after his funeral, I went to our Wednesday morning coffee spot. I don't know why. Habit, I guess. I sat at our corner table, ordered my usual, and just sat there staring at the empty chair across from me. And that's when it hit me. I had been taking our friendship for granted, not the big things. I knew George was important to me. I knew I cared about him, but the little things. The way he always brought an extra newspaper so we could argue about the sports section. The way he'd call me when there was a good documentary on TV he thought I'd like. The way he'd listen to me complain about my back pain without trying to fix it or tell me about his own aches. I had 52 years with George, and I spent most of them assuming we'd have 52 more. After George died, I started paying attention to my other friends differently, really paying attention. And what I noticed scared me. My friend Bill had been talking about chest pains for months, but I just said, "Yeah, getting old is hell, isn't it?" instead of telling him he should see a cardiologist. My friend Ed had been hinting that he was struggling since his wife moved to the nursing home, but instead of offering to have him over for dinner, I'd just said, "Hang in there, buddy." My friend Frank had been wanting to organize a reunion with our old work crew for years, and every time he brought it up, we'd say, "Yeah, we should do that sometime," but never actually made any plans. I realized I'd been treating my friends like they were part of the landscape, always there, reliable, unchanging. I'd stopped really seeing them as people with problems and dreams and limited time. That's when I decided to change everything about how I approached friendships. First, I called Bill and told him I was worried about his chest pains and that I wanted to drive him to see a doctor. Turns out he'd been having irregular heartbeats that needed medication, but he'd been putting off the appointment because he didn't want to bother anyone. Then I started having Ed over for Sunday dinner every week. Not because I felt sorry for him, but because I realized I genuinely enjoyed his company and had been missing out on good stories by not making the effort. I called Frank and told him I wanted to help organize that work reunion. We set a date, rented a VFW hall, and tracked down 12 guys from our old engineering team. It was one of the best nights I'd had in years. But the biggest change was this. I stopped having surface-level conversations. You know how men do that? Someone asks how you're doing and you say, "Can't complain," or "Still above ground." But you don't really tell them how you are. You keep things light, don't want to burden anyone with your real thoughts. Well, I stopped doing that. When Bill asked how I was doing, I started telling him, really telling him, about missing my wife, about worrying that my memory wasn't as sharp as it used to be, about being proud that my grandson got into college. And you know what happened? My friends started doing the same thing with me. Ed told me he'd been thinking about selling his house because maintaining it was getting too hard, but he was afraid his kids would think he was giving up. We spent 2 hours talking about it, and I helped him see that downsizing might actually give him more freedom, not less. Frank confessed that he'd been feeling useless since retiring, like his life didn't matter anymore. I reminded him about all the bridges he'd helped design, all the young engineers he'd mentored, and we started volunteering together at the community college, helping kids with math and science. Bill admitted he'd been scared about his heart problems and didn't want to worry his family. We talked about how normal that fear was and how we could look out for each other. These conversations weren't happening because we knew time was limited. They were happening because I finally understood that every conversation might be our last chance to really know each other. In the 3 years since George died, I've lost 3 more friends. Each loss has been devastating. But here's what's different now. I don't have any regrets about things left unsaid. When Tom was dying, I was able to tell him how much our 40-year friendship had meant to me, how he'd helped me through my divorce, how much I respected the way he'd handled his own challenges. When Charlie passed suddenly, I was grateful that just the week before, I'd called him to tell him how much I appreciated his sense of humor and how he always kept our poker games fun, even when we were all having bad luck. I learned something important from watching my friends die. The tragedy isn't that we're going to lose people we care about. The tragedy is losing them before we've really known them, before we've told them what they mean to us, before we've made the most of the time we have together. Now, when I look at my address book with all those crossed-out names, I don't just see loss. I see a record of friendship given and received. I see guys who knew they mattered. I see relationships that were complete, not perfect, but complete. I still miss George every Wednesday morning. I probably always will, but I don't regret our friendship anymore. I celebrate it, and I've learned to do the same with the friends I still have. We don't wait for special occasions to check in on each other. We don't keep our real thoughts to ourselves. We don't assume there will always be more time. Because here's what I know now that I didn't know at 75. Friendship isn't something you have, it's something you do. Every conversation is a choice to know someone better or to stay on the surface. Every phone call is an opportunity to show up for someone or to just go through the motions. My friends are still dying. At my age, that's not going to stop. But I'm not wasting any more time treating the people I care about like they'll be here forever. I called my friend Robert yesterday just to tell him I was thinking about him. I invited my neighbor Jim over for dinner next week because he mentioned his wife was visiting their daughter and he'd be eating alone. I'm driving 2 hours this weekend to visit my old army buddy because he sounded down on the phone. These aren't grand gestures. They're just the ordinary ways we show friendship while we still can. If you're watching this and you have friends you've been meaning to call, people you've been meaning to thank, conversations you've been putting off for someday, please don't wait. Someday has a way of never coming. Pick up the phone, write the letter, have the conversation. Tell people what they mean to you while they can still hear you. Because the greatest gift you can give someone isn't waiting for the perfect moment. It's making this moment matter. If this meant something to you, call a friend today. And let me know in the comments, who's someone you need to reach out to? Sometimes we all need the reminder that love is meant to be shared, not saved.